Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the first of 4 industry discussions related to the Spark Sioux Falls effort. I want to thank our panelists. We have a terrific lineup to kick us off here today in the food, energy, and manufacturing sectors, and we are going to be continuing this every Tuesday at 9 a.m. So mark your calendars and hopefully you all can join us. I do want to let those of you who are in these industries know, as well as those who are simply members of the business community with interest here, that after this Zoom session, you are going to receive a survey link to answer the same questions that our panelists are going to be answering for us this morning, because we want to hear from you as well. We want to gather as much insight and as much feedback as we can so that those involved with the Spark Sioux Falls effort can then use that information to hopefully further support your business, your industry, and the broader recovery efforts here for our community as we attempt to emerge from the pandemic and the resulting economic hits that it has caused. Looks like all of our panelists are now with us. I will share, of course, you know, this is our first time trying to do this, and I know we have a lot of you watching. We have our terrific lineup of panelists, and we're somewhat learning as we go here. So bear with us. I'm sure we'll get smoother as it goes along, but I just cannot wait to hear what these industry leaders have to share as far as what the last 3 months have been like. Again, remind everybody to mute yourselves. We are recording this session. You will be able to view this in replay, and you will receive a survey both through Zoom directly, as I understand it, when this is over, as well as through your email here in the next day or so. So with that, I am going to get started. I am literally looking at my screen. I'm going to go in sequential order here as I see your faces across the screen and begin to have this conversation, starting with Mark Wiggs. Mark is the General Manager of Smithfield Foods here in Sioux Falls, a company that we've heard more about than most throughout the pandemic for a variety of reasons, but I at least have never been able to hear directly from Mark in the last few months. So I am really looking forward to your perspective, Mark. Why don't you begin by just giving me your view of how the last 3 months have gone within your organization? What are some of the highs? What are some of the lows? And then most importantly, what are things like today?
Well, Jody, as you can imagine, it's been a bit of a roller coaster here. March started off great. We had a full workforce. Demand for our products was at an all-time high. The first signs of COVID-19 hitting the state and the community appeared somewhere in the middle of March. By that time, we were busy preparing company-wide for the impact of COVID-19, and we're rolling out new protocols and new protective measures as soon as they became available. In April, in coordination with the governor and the mayor and both hospitals, we shut down the facility and remained closed, except for essential business here and operations to keep it running until May 11th. And during that time, we continued to pay all employees while the facility was closed. And then the week prior to startup, we notified all the employees that we would reopen, and we scheduled training to educate them on all of our new COVID-19 protocols. We've implemented many changes here in our facility over the last 3 months, most of that with a focus on employee health and safety, including almost 100 touch point sanitizers, social distancing monitors, and mandatory use of face shields and face masks in the plant, and we've erected over 800 barriers. We're ensuring that we are meeting or exceeding CDC and OSHA guidance right now. We also have continued to pay any employee who is out due to COVID-19 that has either been diagnosed, has symptoms, or has had exposure. Ramp up has been measured due to employees being off work for so long and the slow return to work in some of the areas. Currently, we're operating at somewhere between 70 and 80% of capacity, depending on the specific department. The great news is that for all the family farmers who supply our facility, we're once again able to begin moving their animals through our system, which in turn will help support the larger agricultural community. One of the really good things in May, we saw an incredible outpouring of support for our employees during the thank you parade. That was an extremely powerful moment here. And we've heard a lot from our team members who have expressed great appreciation for that support. You know, I'd just like to thank all of our Smithfield family here for the work they've done to improve the health and safety of our workplace. And I'd like to thank every employee for their efforts in our continuous journey to safety excellence here at Smithfield Sioux Falls.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks so much for the recap. And most of all, good to hear where you're at today. I'm going to ask all our panelists the same question. I'm going to stay with you on this too, which is, I'm sure you've learned a lot in the last few months.
It's been...
And, you know, Smithfield is a unique operation, but is there a takeaway or two that you've learned that might help others, either in similar industries or even in the broader business community?
One of our biggest takeaways is that we weren't fully prepared. You know, I don't know if we were or the CDC wasn't or the Department of Health, but we've learned a lot working with those organizations on how to protect our employees. And I think it's made us a lot stronger here. I think with face masks and face shields that, you know, we just haven't seen recurrence here at the plant, and we're thankful for that.
Fantastic. Good to hear. And thanks for the candor on that as well. I don't know that anybody would say that we were fully prepared. So thanks for joining us. We're going to come back. All of our panelists will be answering a series of questions, by the way. So I'm going to move along now to Paul Sova, who is next on my screen. Paul, of course, is the CEO of Showplace Wood Products, a big operation, very involved company. So Paul, good to see you. How have things been going there for the last few months? Where are you at today and what have you learned?
First, good morning, Jody, and good morning, everyone. And thank you for asking me to be a part of this. A little bit about Showplace. We are a manufacturing company. We make kitchen and bathroom cabinetry for the home. We distribute our products throughout the country. Most people think that maybe we're a Sioux Falls-based company. I mean, or we sell our products only in this region, but that's not true. Sioux Falls is an important market, but most of our business is elsewhere in the country. We employ nearly 600 people, and we are an employee-owned company. We became employee-owned back in 2006. Company started in 1999. We were off to a record start this year. We had a record pace for first quarter. And then, of course, things changed as we passed through March. And then for us, it became kind of a slow motion road to a downward trend because we could see it coming, but it hadn't hit us yet. As March unfolded, our customers around the country were still closing deals with homeowners and builders for kitchens and bathrooms. And so there was a backlog that we enjoyed for a while and helped us stay afloat throughout March and April. But we knew that there was going to be a decline coming because, as we all know, the country and the whole world shut down and nobody shopped for anything. And in our business, most people shop online for a while, but then eventually they need to go into a showroom somewhere in the country or to our showrooms here in the city to make a decision about remodeling their home or building a new home and buying cabinets from us. So it's a process that means that we must have face-to-face contact with homeowners or builders eventually. And when the country shut down, no one shopped. I mean, no one went out anywhere for anything. And so our business had a sharp decline, and we saw it coming. We just didn't know how sharp it would be. And if there's one thing that I lost a lot of sleep over, it would be that and of course having an outbreak of sickness in our own plant, and we were really quite concerned about all that. And at the same time, maybe being forced to close the business, and that's what we talked about in March. Would we be forced by government or lack of sales or lack of supplies or employees that were sick, or too many of them that were sick, that we might have to shut down the business? And so we began aggressively preparing for all those things. Of course, like I think everyone on the panel will say, we got very aggressive in cleaning the place and hygiene and social distancing. We changed everything that we do in the factory and separated people. We had a luxury here to start with, by the way, of having 300,000 square feet of space, and not by design for a pandemic, but for manufacturing purposes. Our people were already spread out. And so it wasn't really difficult for us to achieve social distancing, but we did what we could there, shut down our cafeteria, clean the place every day. And we're still doing all that, I think, like everybody is. But we saw the sharp decline come. We knew it was coming. We didn't know how drastic it would be, but it dropped very quickly by about 30% with incoming sales that we were seeing in April and going into May, and that caused us some distress. The decision that we made, and you've asked us to talk about what did we do beyond social distancing and cleaning, is probably the most important decision we made early on in March was to keep the business open. Even though many of our competitors were shutting down for a period of time, some were forced to shut down by their own state governments, which was a surprise to us that we didn't see coming. For example, in Pennsylvania, there are many cabinet makers in Pennsylvania with whom we compete that were forced to close by their government. And we're fortunate to live in South Dakota and in the middle of the country and in a state that didn't take those kinds of steps for manufacturers. So deciding to remain open, regardless of how steep the sales decline was a key decision. We also made the decision we would not lay off or furlough anyone. So what we did and what we are doing right now, as a matter of fact, we have some reduced hours in May and June. Our plants and offices are very clean, and people are painting and cleaning, and we make work for people on short days to keep them busy. We do gardening with our employees. I mean, we're doing all kinds of things to make work, to keep people busy, keep them employed, and keep their paychecks full as we can. And that was a key decision for us, to not shut down our business and to keep our workforce intact, because the unintended consequence of that was that other customers around the country saw Showplace as being a reliable manufacturer that was open for business and was delivering on time. And while many of our competitors were closing, some voluntarily and some being forced to close by their own state governments. And we didn't anticipate that. That wasn't what we planned on happening, but it made our sales drop, I believe, less dramatic, because we could take business that we probably wouldn't have otherwise have gotten. So that proved to be the right move for us. Because right now we are seeing the market for our products in home building and in remodeling, and we are primarily a remodeler. We are seeing the customers come back to the marketplace. And we measure that in many ways, starting with internet traffic, but we are seeing people come back into the showrooms all over the country, including Sioux Falls. And in just the most recent couple of weeks now, I think it's beyond just a statistical anomaly. I think we're seeing a trend here that, at least for the American home building industry and remodeling, that is picking up. And so we are looking and booking into July right now, and July looks to be a full month for us, full weeks, full hours for our employees. And as a matter of fact, we're beginning to hire a few more now. We've have a few openings in production. So that decision to stay open and having a state government that supported that was really good for us, and was the right decision to make, even though we debated it hotly here as to what we should do in the face of sharply declining sales. It was a good call for us.
All right, great overview. So glad to hear that things are rebounding, and hopefully that's just the start. So again, we'll be back with Paul, but thanks for that introduction. I'll go to Clark Meyer now. Clark is the president of Concrete Materials and Ellison Eastern Railroad. Full disclosure, we've not tested his microphone yet, so hopefully that's going to work for us. Clark, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, fill us in on how the last few months have gone for your operations, lessons learned, and where you're at today.
Good morning, Jody, and thank you for having me. Just to tell you, Sweden Construction is the parent company of Concrete Materials, Rail to Rail, and the Ellison Eastern Railroad. And so we were very fortunate in this part of the season when we were ramping up the construction season. We're very fortunate that a majority of our team members are in a solitary area. They're equipment operators, heavy equipment, truck drivers, or plant operators. And those that aren't there are typically like an outdoor environment. We do have some areas where there's normal congregations, such as big rooms, lunchrooms, and we came up with alternatives for those. We just changed our practice of safety meetings, broke them down to smaller safety meetings. And a handful of our office staff was able to work from home, but it was a time when we were ramping up and trying to bring employees back and get ready for our season. And so we did just like the other two gentlemen talked about. We implemented a plan following the standard CDC guidelines. Encourage employees to stay home if they're sick. We did all the sanitation and the hygiene stuff that everyone's going to talk about, I'm sure. Along with we have a sick day policy already. We loosened those requirements just to mitigate and control and monitor everything that we could. But even because of that, as we're very weather driven, and so as a lot of our stuff is under contract ready for the year and the commitments that we've made. And so there was times when, and as you guys know, we had a fairly drier spring as compared to the last couple of years, so we weren't hampered by excessive rainfall. But so in the days we were busy, we were short-staffed, but I do think the team members that came to work were thankful to be out of the house. They were thankful to be employed with a solid, stable company and working and doing the job. And I think they always felt like they were in a safe environment. And of course, we always gave them that option. Moving forward today, our business has been solid yet. And I don't want to jump ahead too much in the questions, but that's kind of the overview of the spring so far.
Okay, good to hear. I will move along now to Jeff Lautt, President and CEO of Poet. Obviously, the energy sector had huge impacts, immediate impacts here during the pandemic. So Jeff, why don't you fill us in on how you've navigated the last few months and how things are looking today?
Yeah, thanks, Jody. Thanks for having me today. It's been an interesting few months for us as well, just like everyone. We are deemed an essential business, and February we were monitoring, kind of as this virus moved from east to west, and it became very clear that it wasn't a matter of if it was going to affect us, it was a matter of when. I think like many of the businesses, at least those of scale, you have contingency plans that built in place for disruptions. Nothing like this. You can't plan for something like this. You can't have, business interruption plans. Most of it being weather related, not a pandemic related. And so we were actually pretty aggressive on the team member front. Very early on, mid-March, we made a bold decision we had tested our IT systems Thankfully, we're in a business that here in Sioux Falls where we employ around 400 people that we could largely work remote, except for a handful of researchers that we did some social distancing and things in place to protect their health. Everyone, we sent them home in mid-March, thankfully. And as a business have not been affected hardly at all, given our scale of about 1,800 employees across 7 states. So that's been a blessing. What we then saw in the back half of March is gasoline demand erode very quickly, and it was dropping like a rock, and it ultimately bottomed in the first half of April, not knowing where it was going to go. When things are just like when the stock market's falling, you're not sure how far it's going to go. It feels like it's going to go to zero. That's how it was feeling kind of in our business. It ultimately bottomed at about half of normal demand, which was significant. And I know everyone thinks of us as a biofuels producer, which we are, but we also have other products that we produce like CO2, which goes into the beverage, food production industry. So we have a lot of large customers that out there that rely on us to continue to keep their operations and producing and processing animals and whatnot. We also are providing some industrial products into the roadway systems and a large feed ingredients as well. So on the feed ingredient side, it was actually relatively stable because people were still eating up until food processors like Smithfield and others started having their issues that started to affect feed demand, and we started to navigate through that. So it was really proud of our team in a matter of honestly a few weeks. If you can imagine taking a company our size and scaling it in half in about 3 to 4 weeks, all with the idea knowing that you're eventually going to have to bring it back to some level, maybe not back to where it was normal, but you have to make some difficult decisions along the way as to how you navigate that and keep everything intact and supply your customers and respond on a daily basis as needed. Since then, the industry has rebounded on the fuel demand side to about half of what was lost. So we're kind of that 75-ish, approaching 80% of demand. Interestingly enough, how good that feels. If you would have asked us back in January that you're going to lose 20 to 25% of demand, we'd say that'd be awful. But it feels everything's relative, right? So we have shut some plants down in the process, of course, idled production, slowed production where we can, tried to adjust to market demands, international and domestic as well. We are seeing international demand come back as well as domestic, and so we're responding accordingly. And I think it's going to be a steady climb, although we're cautious about, there's clearly going to be an economic impact. And we're going to continue to monitor all the data that we can get our hands on and understand exactly where does it come back to. Probably from us, one good timing is we are entering driving season, which is good for gasoline demand. So that's going to help, I think, a little bit of the recovery. There's maybe a little bit of anticipation on our side that as people get back to a normal way of life, as they get into wanting to vacation again and feel safe to vacation and travel, that people may be more inclined to drive versus fly. And since we're in the transportation fuel side, that's good for us. And we think that maybe some of our demand offset will happen there as a beneficiary of those maybe not feeling comfortable flying. So it's a slow, steady climb, but it has rebounded relatively decent in the last kind of 4 to 6 weeks as states in the world starts to reopen its economies.
I realize this is a small portion of the business, but it made headlines, so I'll ask, how's the sanitizer line going?
Yeah, the hand sanitizer, and that's a good example of kind of our entrepreneurial spirit. And we literally, something that we had never created, and people think it's just throwing alcohol into, but it's an entirely new specification for industrial ethanol that we had not made prior. But we literally had a team of engineers and scientists working 24/7, figuring that out in the early days and then meeting that spec. And of course, it really started with kind of more of a passion around helping hospitals, first responders, long-term care facilities, and we donated a bunch of product, and then we started to kind of get into the commercial chain. Sitting here today, it's been pretty successful. I'm not sure where it's going to go long-term. Obviously, there's some very well-to-do long-term players that are in that market today, but I think that if you asked me, I think just as when 9/11 happened, we changed how we traveled and we changed security, and there was new things that changed forever. There's likely going to be some level of, industrial sanitation, hygiene, what have you, that's going to change in the world. And so we think there's a whole new level of probably demand that's going to be required, and we're assessing how we can best fill that. We're only interested in being in businesses where we can be a strong leader in those businesses, and we think that this is one of those. But we're going to be careful how we continue to press into it and launch it. So
it'll be interesting to watch. Okay, we'll come back to you as well. So thanks for the overview. And finally, over at Raven, President and CEO Dan Rykhus. Raven is an interesting one with 3 very distinct divisions in different markets. So you've seen a little bit of everything. Paint me a picture of what Raven's been through, where you're at today, and what we might be able to learn from you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jody. And thanks to the Economic Development Group for hosting this. And it's a pleasure to be here. So just as a reminder, Raven is a global technology company. We've been around since 1956, and we have 3 divisions, as you noted, serving precision ag, specialty plastics, and the aerospace and defense markets. We have about 1,200 team members today, and about half of those are involved in manufacturing operations, and the other half are involved in product development and other professional positions. We're located in 6 different states across the U.S., and we have operations in 4 countries around the world. So that's a snapshot. So think, as far as the pandemic in the last 3 months, on February 26th, we realized as an executive team that this pandemic that we were reading about had potential implications to our business. So we set up internally a coronavirus leadership team and started to consider for a week, what are the steps that we need to take? And right away, we established 2 priorities. Number 1 is the well-being of our team members, and number 2 is preservation of our business. And from February 26th forward, we made decisions consistent with that. So right away, we started after the first week of determining how can we create spaces that were conducive to safety. We believed we'd be deemed an essential business in each of our 3 divisions, and we were. And we were off to a great start, just like almost everybody has said here. Each of our 3 businesses were doing exceptionally well at the start of the year. We have bold plans to grow each of our businesses that we were implementing. And it's been a mixed bag over the last 3 months. Our ag business has continued to perform well. We're actually, for the first quarter, showing growth over prior year due to the technology that we sell and the use of that technology to improve efficiency on the farm, and as well as some of our new products. Our aerospace and defense business has held up pretty well through the first quarter, but it's our films business that's really been the one that's been hurt by the pandemic. So through it, we implemented all the things that everyone's already talked about. We implemented early, and we've learned a lot of lessons along the way from that. As it sits today, it's kind of the same situation that I just described. Our ag business continues to do pretty well. Our aerospace and defense business, where we design and build stratospheric balloon platforms and radar systems that we sell largely to the U.S. government, that business continues to do well. But like really all 3 of our businesses where we used to design and manufacture products, in many cases now, we couple that with services that we wrap around those products. So in the case of Aerostar, not only are we designing and delivering these products, but we also go on site and do installations and provide service on setup and operations. So that's been hampered by the inability to travel around the country. As far as some of the highs and lows, of course, we were involved we were asked to develop personal protective gowns locally. We sprung into action, never done that before, and came up with a design, produced 100,000 of those now, and continue to have some interest in that. But the really cool story behind that is we'd never thought of ourselves making gowns, but we did it, and we felt good about it. Well, now there's actually a FEMA major tens of millions of units of gowns where FEMA wants to stockpile these. And there's some provisions to ensure that some of those are made in the US. So it's an example of a humanitarian effort, community good, morphing into the potential for a very large business opportunity for us. And there's other stories like that, and I think you have that on one of our future questions. I'm really proud of the Raven team, the resilience that we've shown. We've avoided any sort of downsizing across the company through all this. The practices that we put in place resulted in, so far we've only had 4 positive cases out of 1,200 team members, despite operating our manufacturing facilities all the way through all of this. So we're proud of that. I'm proud of the team. Our workforce has been very mobile. Our manufacturing people have moved to where the work is within our facilities across divisional lines, and our professional staff has done a great job working remote. One last thing on what's an effective action. I think that was the last question for this part. One of the things that we've seen is, of course, we're doing everything we can to address the pandemic, but we've seen mental health issues across the workforce and hear about it throughout the community. So in parallel to the work to address all the distancing and all those things that are in our face all the time, we've also set up a mental well-being effort to run in parallel with this, to look differently and behave differently as a company with how we help remove the stigma around mental health issues and help people take that first step to seek help. And then also consider, as an employer, how can we be part of the solution to improving that?
Oh, that's a great point. And maybe worth having you detail out more for others, because absolutely, I think a universal issue that so many of us have been dealing with. So thank you for that. I loved that moment with Raven and the PPE gowns during the pandemic. So many of your businesses we know have innovation just in your DNA. And we definitely saw that at work here as times got tough. So I'm going to go back to Mark Wiggs now for the next series of questions here. And we're going to begin with what we can do, because that's one of the goals of this discussion. And by the way, if you joined us late, thank you for signing up for this. This is the first of 4 Spark Sioux Falls panel discussions. Those of you who did RSVP for the session will receive a survey afterward where you're going to be asked the same questions as our panelists were, because we want to hear your feedback. So Mark, I'll return to you, and let's talk about some ways that we as a broader business community might be able to help Smithfield and its industry in the recovery. Are there some things that come to mind for you there?
Well, I think one of the first things, Jody, would be, that the community continue to celebrate the outstanding and the important work that our team members are doing to keep the food supply intact, and welcome them, back into the businesses and around town, just like you would any other frontline worker. With a daily payroll of somewhere around $900,000, our employees have money to spend, and I think it would be to the benefit of the community as an economy collectively to have them into your businesses. The other thing we'd like to do is reinforce to service providers that the facility is safe, and should be no hesitation coming in and providing services here at Smithfield. And the last one would be that reinforce to the community that the facility is safe, and if they're looking for a job, we have employment available. We've taken aggressive measures to protect the health and safety of our employees. All our entrances are covered. They're thermal scanning as you come in. They're staffed with healthcare professionals. We want to make sure everybody's healthy coming into the facility. The last thing we've done, we've also brought on an industry leader in healthcare. And right now we're providing on-demand, on-site COVID testing. So we're about as buttoned up as we can be right now.
Yeah, I knew you had made a lot of accommodations, but I didn't even realize, I don't think, the extent until I heard you share those today. So very good to know. Paul, back over to Showplace Wood Products. What are some things the community can do to help support you in the recovery? Paul, you're on mute.
I did, sorry, I unmuted. You know, aside from going to our showrooms and being interested in remodeling their kitchen, which I recommend to my friends, that they do it every 3 or 4 years. But aside from that, one of the biggest challenges that we're going to face going forward, because we believe that the fundamentals are in place for our business to grow. The fundamentals of for home building and remodeling. We think the demographics are in perfect shape, and we believe that the demand is going to be there, even though it was stalled some this year. I guess the age-old problem that we have in Sioux Falls is people and having people available. And I guess if there's one thing that I suspect most of us would say is that we'll need help addressing that issue. It's complicated, and I don't pretend to know the answer to that because we've been dealing with it for so long. But I suspect that will be problematic for most of us. Is hiring people as the economy picks back up. It may even become more difficult here than it was before. I think I feel that coming.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
that would be
our next question too. So I think maybe for purposes of efficiency, we're going to combine these two, because I think a lot of you are going to talk about workforce. It's not an issue that's gone away. You know, we might be sitting at 10% unemployment here as of our most recent number. That was back in April though. So I suspect it's shrinking. You know, and Paul, you've implemented strategies over time, but you know, I know the community wants to play a role in that, needs to play a role in that, in terms of training and education and everything else. Are there workforce related initiatives that we might be able to do here coming out of the recovery that would help your industry?
Well, you know, government needs to help some. I think having an unemployment insurance rule that requires people to look for work would be appropriate for us as a state, and that would give us some advantage, I think. What we are seeing presently, we're still getting traffic, and people are coming to our offices in Harrisburg and looking for work, which is a good thing, and because they know about that. We're doing some minor advertising. But what we are seeing is people not just looking for an employment, but people who are asking specifically about insurance and health insurance. And because our program is good, like most good employers in town. And that was surprising to me, that people would be shopping employers because of insurance, not just for pay. And I like that, because that's an important part of what we have to offer. So that, you know, there's room for some optimism that way.
Sounds good.
I guess that, you know, that's kind of the way I see it right now.
It's not an easy question, so.
No, it isn't.
But you know, all strategies are appreciated here. I'll go back to Clark now with concrete materials. Again, the questions now, what can the business community do to further support your needs? And then where are you at in terms of your projected workforce needs, and what might we be able to do with you on that front?
Thank you, Jody. I guess for our year, we feel like the majority of this current year, we're going to be okay. We had a lot of our season booked and under contract before the pandemic hit. But our business portfolio does depend on a blend of public works. I mean, DOT, county, and city spending on infrastructure. And then we also depend on private construction, both commercial and private. We do see engineers and architects telling us that they have some projects they thought were going to go or are on hold. And so, and the owners are just saying they would put them on hold to see how they play out. So we hope that the confidence regains in the community and the private companies release the projects and build. We do anticipate tax dollars being tight, and maybe not as much infrastructure spending in the in next year, but we kind of have to anticipate that moving forward and plan accordingly.
Okay. In terms of your workforce, do you feel like you're in the right position? Are there things that we might be able to do as a community to further support those needs?
No, and I echo the other two panelists. We are short employees, and we've had trouble. We've been hiring through this whole thing, trying to get employees, specifically truck drivers. We've implemented a ELDT program, which is an entry level driver training, meaning we'll take any employee off the street and at our dollar train them to get their CDL and drive a truck. So we've been a little more trying to be innovative and open more channels of getting employees in, but we're not having the employees coming in the door that we need, and I think we have to end the extra $600 on unemployment should come to an end, so people look for work. And also, I agree with Paul, where people have to apply. People aren't even applying, so we have to tighten up the unemployment to make it incentivize them to go to work.
Right. Okay, thank you. Back to Jeff Lautt with Poet. And we could maybe talk about the state of the Chancellor plant. That was one of them that was idled. Obviously had some workforce implications here. Jeff, I don't know where you're at with your corporate center and how many of those folks are still working full time or not. But give me a sense of where Poet is at from a workforce standpoint, current and projected, and then what we as a business community might be able to do to support that workforce need, as well as any broader needs that the business has.
Yeah, sure. So here in Sioux Falls at our corporate headquarters, we started a kind of a retransitioning in a couple of weeks ago, and we're doing it in a phased approach with a lot of protocols and whatnot to do it in a safe and responsible manner. And as you all know, you've got a varying degree of your workforce, and you have those that are maybe higher risk, and whether that be pregnant women or whatnot. So we're trying to be very sensitive and hearing the needs of the team members. So it's gone really well. We found that a very large portion are eager to get back in and be, have some structure, see people, and we're doing so in a way that I think is safe and responsible regarding the current times. We're going to continue to do that over the next few weeks. At our biorefineries, we've been very lucky and blessed that we have a relatively low number of people at each plant. They're very high tech, so if we did have an outbreak, we could continue to operate those. So far, we've not had any of those issues. We've been able to maintain operations there. In terms of hiring or recruiting people, we've not had any issues in our sector about the businesses that we operate and the type of skill sets that we're looking for. So that's been actually pretty good for us, and I expect that to continue to be the case. I think, it's like everything in life. One of the things that we saw even here at Poet is, as businesses, they don't just go along. I mean, every day you're kind of fighting to stay in business, to live another day, to be innovative, and when something like this happens and has affected virtually every business out there, even our team members were very grateful to say, wow, this is fragile. We're grateful to be employed, and the appreciation for being a part of the company it just was brought to light. Like everything in life, we take it for granted until something's potentially taken away or could be taken away. So our people have been awesome. They have been fully engaged. They've been kind of said, what can we do to help the organization, realizing they are the company. The company it's not just some institution. So that's been great. I'd say one area that was affected for us is we have a very robust intern program. Bring on 50 to 60 interns every year for the summer. It's a great program. People roll their sleeves up. They learn a lot. They add value. And oftentimes they end up coming back working full time for us, a year or two later when they graduate. Unfortunately, the timing of that was right when it didn't make sense for us to bring in 50 to 60, people at that place of their life and put them in. And we were working remote anyway. They wouldn't have the mentoring and coaching. So we paused that for this year. And so I think of those people that, those college students who are, what are they missing? And I think as a business community, we need to be thinking about those that are at some stage of that secondary education, ready to enter the workforce in the next 1 to 2 years to make sure that they've gotten some of that development that they need to. And so that we continue to have that feed of young talent coming out in the next 1 to 3 years. In terms of the business community, what they can do for us, it's largely driven by the world getting back to normal. So go out and drive. If if you're going to travel, drive your car, drive the 229 loop, fill up with biofuels, a high level of biofuels, E15 or E85, grill some meat because we feed all those animals. So, you know, as your summer, grill some meat, drink a beer or a soda, and all that's going to drive demand for our products. So I think honestly and I know we have to be responsible about this, but I think as people can feel comfortable about getting back to a normal way of life, that's what's going to directly impact the businesses or the chains of supply chains that we then satisfy on a daily basis with the products that we produce.
I love that. Keep it simple. And you know what? I'm so glad you brought up that internship, well, the broader internship issue, but specifically your program, because if you are sitting there listening to Jeff say that he doesn't have a problem finding workers and you're wondering, well, how could that be? Well, that doesn't just happen. I mean, this is a company that I think has taken a very intentional approach to its workforce pipeline. A lot of higher ed relationships and a lot of internship experiences. So there's more out there, and I'm sure, you know, Poet's been great about sharing what they do, but if you're wondering, that's a good example right there. And so is the next one, Dan Rykhus over at Raven Industries. You know, Dan, last time you and I spoke, it was early this year, I want to say, and your workforce had really been ramping up. You were at some nice levels as far as your people go, especially here in Sioux Falls. What does that look like today? Where are you at as far as workforce development, and what more might the business community be able to do to support you?
Yeah, thanks. I wish I had something as cool to say as drive around and grill meat and drink beer. But as far as our workforce goes, we were in a hiring mode. We added on about 75 technical staff, product development people throughout the last year. As we realized the pandemic, we had plans to bring on 130 additional staff in this year, largely in the engineering fields. And we put that on pause in early March. We froze any new hiring positions because there was so much uncertainty, and we just didn't want to keep adding staff until we understood what the scenario really looked like for us. Like Jeff said, we have a very robust intern program as well. We typically have about 50 interns, and we were able to maintain 25 of those 50. So we actually have 25 interns yet going on this year. So what we did, we put it on hold, the 130 staffing, and we, except for one area, which is our bold long-term growth initiative, and that's to develop autonomous agricultural solutions. We made 2 acquisitions in the last 6 months, one in Canada, one in Iowa, that brought technology and an actual agricultural platform to us. We're combining that with our own internal, all the different products and technology we've developed to automate sprayers. And we've continued to hire in that area. And actually, that's been a real bright spot. Just in the last couple weeks, we've been able to recruit some excellent talent into Sioux Falls from other parts of the country, working for large equipment manufacturers. And so that's been a really a bright spot for us. So I think Sioux Falls is appealing. You know, we all know the things that we wrestle with and have to overcome to recruit people here. But I think, you know, in an odd way, the pandemic has maybe shown some light on some of the positives about how we govern in this state, the leadership in our community here, the spaces that we enjoy here, just the way of life that we enjoy in South Dakota. So it's been an excellent bright spot for us, the recent hiring that we've done. So we'll continue to turn back that faucet on throughout the year. We went into the pandemic with a belief that we're going to pause our bold growth strategy for a couple of quarters and believe that it's going to be rough. And by the end of the year, that the great economy that we enjoyed going into this would likely return, and our strong positions in each of our markets would still be there, and that our intent would be to begin hiring again. And that's what we believe. And that's what we're operating to. Just a couple odds and ends on what can we do as a community to help. One is we can support our leaders. We have We have strong leaders in this community, and I want to thank the mayor. He's doing an excellent job of leading through a lot of different difficulties over the last couple of years. We can support, and like others have said, encourage our lawmakers, our delegation to make good choices as it relates to the business issues that impact us, and those have been noted already. Another thing we can do as a business community is support the different agencies in our community that make this such an attractive place. United Way is one way, but there's others to support those nonprofits that sometimes too often we take for granted, and they have deep needs right now. They're hurting just like all the others, and probably in more severe ways. And then the last thing I would just say, longer term, we've got to continue to invest in all the things that create an innovative climate for business. Our educational systems, diversity in our workforce, all those things matter. And I think about the companies on the call today, like Poet and us and others. Fundamentally, what made us successful is our innovation. And that's what's going to propel us in the future. So long term, we've got to keep investing in those elements that create that great culture for innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been a hallmark of Raven too. I mean, this commitment to continuing. It might not be at the same level, but to invest in R&D even when times are tough. It has paid off for your company multiple times. And I think Watch Raven Autonomy is what Dan is talking about, because for the Sioux Falls community, that's another potential game changer as that business line hopefully takes off. Dan gave me a great bridge into our final question, and then we'll wrap it up. And that is to be a bit broader and a bit more community minded. You're all community leaders in addition to being business leaders. And I want to start with the premise that there's always opportunity in challenging times. So there's opportunity for your company, but we believe there's opportunity for the greater Sioux Falls community as well. What opportunities do you all see for Sioux Falls to emerge even stronger as we work through this recovery? I will go back for a final time to Mark Wiggs with Smithfield.
Jody, I think the community has just shown an amazing resilience through these unprecedented times. Months and years ahead, I think as a company, Smithfield will have to support the community more. I think the community through this pandemic is changing how they spend their disposable income. We've seen the restaurants and the retail business have a little downturn and reorganize and limiting the social interaction there. And I think with that money, people will head towards long-term consumables. I think right now, if you look around the business with the low interest rates that we have right now, people will start doing some refinancing of homes, freeing up some money to maybe do home improvements, new construction, actually go out and buy a home if they hadn't been. I think the retail business is going to have a greater need for delivery and pickup orders, and I think there'll be more jobs created in that area. And, here at Smithfield, we're just going to have to continue to seek out opportunities for a partnership, whether it's public or private, working through the Chamber of Commerce or any other organization to see what we can do to help that the Sioux Falls community is going to be stronger when we come out of this.
Great, thank you. And thanks again for being on. This community has dialogued with Smithfield in a lot more ways than we are used to doing. And hopefully it's the start of a good, positive, proactive conversation and relationship that's going to benefit both of us. So I want to thank you and all the folks at Smithfield for allowing the participation in the call today. It was
well, thanks for having us, Jody. It's been great.
I'm going to go back to Paul. Okay, he might be in Harrisburg, but we're still going to let him talk about the broader Sioux Falls region and Sioux Falls community. You rely on people continuing to buy homes and to want to stay in their homes and improve their homes. Paul, what kind of opportunities do you see for the Sioux Falls community itself to come out of this stronger?
I do unmute, I'm sorry, excuse me. We've always considered Sioux Falls to be our nearest suburb at Harrisburg. So we always feel a deep connection to Sioux Falls. I do think to answer that question that we've been talking about here is maybe echo what Dan talked about in providing support to our nonprofits who serve people in Sioux Falls and in Harrisburg and surrounding communities. They're under enormous pressure right now, and we need to continue to back them up. All the folks that I talk to that operate in that arena know that there's significant pressures right now on our agencies that serve people and families are under a lot of stress right now throughout our whole state, but certainly this region. So we need to keep supporting them. It's critical to us, even though times are tough. Where we place our charitable dollars is going to be important, and making good decisions is what we talk about at Showplace on a regular basis. One thing that I would recommend is that should we have a resurgence or a second wave of this pandemic, I'm not so sure that shutting down schools was a good call. And it happened across the country, it happened across the world, I clearly understand that. I think we're going to see data that's going to come out that maybe disputes that was the right move, and that we've left a lot of children behind because of that. So I guess if I have a recommendation that we really clearly debate that this fall, should that decision become in front of us again.
Yeah, there is some early data coming out on just that. So good point. Thank you. And thanks again for being on the call. Great to catch up with you. I'll go back now to Clark. Meyer, again, concrete materials. As far as what opportunities do you see for the broader community coming out of all of this, Clark?
Well, I think the message that we've shared with our employees is we're very, very fortunate during this to not be in a highly dense population area. We have some elbow room here in the Midwest, so to speak. And, just on like I told our employees, they can commute to work in their car and come to their office or get in their equipment. And we're not in a crowded subway or a crowded region. And so I think the quality of life in our region has always been good. And now with that offer, I think is even better. So we've had a strong business environment here, and I think it was strong before. And I think even through the pandemic, all the business leaders have been committed to the success of our employees, and I think that'll continue. I think the rebound is going to be good and quicker than other areas.
Yeah, I have had other business leaders say exactly that things that we might have thought were disadvantages, the lack of density, could turn out here in this new world to be a much greater advantage than we would have thought. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Thanks for being part of the discussion. Great to check in with you and your organization. I'll go back to Jeff Lautt at Poet to wrap it up on his end now. And again, the question is, what opportunities exist for the broader Sioux Falls community coming out of this from your perspective, Jeff?
Yeah, so I would say, much to Dan's comments earlier, we're pretty fortunate to live in a state and a community where we have some very good business-friendly philosophies, leaders, and we need to continue to support them, because having businesses in other states around the U.S., you get that ability to compare and contrast. So I would actually say, let's continue to stay the way we are, and let's continue to improve on that. For example, as we decide to make capital investments, and where we do that, we will tend to do that in areas where it's the most cost effective, and there's less regulation from the time till you want to do it to when you can actually get it launched. And so we currently have an environment here that is very conducive to that, and I would continue to support that and say that we continue on that trend, and let's not lose that base that we have. And then I'd also say, like everything, when you have something like this, a crisis, it brings people together, not just individuals, but I think this in a way has brought business communities even closer together. We are all connected in a way that we probably don't realize, and it's easy to focus on our individual companies on a daily basis, but if I think about what we do, I mean, we are impacted by the health of Smithfield Foods in terms of their producers bringing them animals, and we feed those, we provide feed for those producers. We're directly tied to South Dakota's egg economy, which is critical. The health of that economy affects Raven. And, and if the farmers are healthy and strong, then they're generally remodeling or building and buying RVs or boats or equipment or what have you. So we're more connected than we think. And I think maybe going forward, I would just challenge the people on this call, those participating, those listening, is we probably have an opportunity to come even closer together and identify where those synergies are as to how we can help each other all at the same time while we focus on running our own businesses.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. And thanks for bringing it up. Thanks for being on the call. We'll check in, of course, with your business and continue to update everybody as far as how operations are going. So hopefully that rebound that you talked about.
Thanks, Jody.
And finally, I'll go back to Dan to wrap it up. If you missed this, Dan shared with us earlier in the call that his company, Raven, just recruited some very nice talent from out of state. I don't know if they're moving here or not. Hopefully they are, Dan, but
Yeah.
They are good. And these are conversations that you and your team are having a lot. You're having to bring people in addition to growing your own to support that growth. So what opportunities do you see for the Sioux Falls community to solidify itself to become even a more attractive place here going forward?
I think, a little repetition, but embrace what we are, embrace who we are. And I think about our history as an economy and going back 50, 60 years, pretty ag oriented with the retail center. And eventually we layered on banking by some innovation in a lot of different ways. And we layered on healthcare. And now we're layering on technology and manufacturing came along the way there. And I think it's important to embrace that and embrace that we need to support the technology sector. And each of those other examples have become really important planks in the overall economy here. And I think of what Jeff and Poet are doing and what we're doing and lots of other companies. We need to support and embrace startups so that some of them will grow and be successful, and then they'll have their headquarters here. Having a headquarters in Sioux Falls is extraordinarily important versus just having a manufacturing site. It changes the game in terms of the level of community support and the level of talent that you bring in. So that's really important. Maybe another opportunity, this is pretty infancy stage in my thinking, but I'm reminded of how our country embraced energy independence maybe 15 years ago. Jeff, you know better than me. But as a country, we got behind it for a variety of reasons, and there was a tremendous amount of innovation in shale production, lots of capital flow to that. And I think about, our dependence on China today for medical supplies and meds and various things that have come to light. And I think that there could be opportunity for our economy, in particular Sioux Falls, if we chose to embrace it, to think about how do we develop manufacturing and technology opportunities that pull in the kinds of companies and organizations that we have here toward becoming less dependent on other countries for those critical supplies. So maybe there's an idea there somewhere.
Yeah, great point. All right, thank you so much again, all of our panelists. This for me was incredibly valuable. I learned a lot. I think it's the start of a really useful conversation. So hopefully you all feel the same. Again, if you are watching, keep an eye out for that survey. I believe it's going to pop up right after this, and you'll also get a reminder. And then we will be back with you every Tuesday now, 3 more of these, again at 9 a.m. Next week, we're talking financial services and real estate, and then we're going to get into healthcare and biosciences, and we will wrap it up with tech companies and small businesses. So lots more good insight to come. I am sure you will be able to pull this up on replay. We will have it over at SiouxFalls.business. The Development Foundation will have it on YouTube as well. And with that, I will just thank you once again for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll be back with you next week.
Thank you, Jody.
Thanks, Jody.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks, Jody.
Thanks, everyone. Great to talk with you. We will be back in touch with a recap, a link to this, and hopefully we'll see you all again for these next few weeks as we bring on a new batch of panelists. So again, really appreciate your thoughts. Great hearing from all of you.